Are you feeling anxious or worried or stressed about the election right now? Did you know that the emotion of anxiety is actually the same as the emotion of excitement? Allow me to share some good news, some reasons for you to get excited right now and to feel excited about the election, even if it's a little bit worrying or anxious to you. And allow me to invite you to release your anxiety and to not worry about it, and to enjoy some peace and happiness that you can have right now. So here's some good news. This election saw the greatest voter turnout and percentage of voter turnout, I believe, in the United States that we've had in the last century, in the last 100 years. The participation from American citizens was incredible. And that's a great reason to celebrate. What an amazing republic that we live in, where we can choose our leaders and where people have decided to turn out this time and to make their voices heard. I'm so grateful to be a part of this wonderful movement, this group of people who voted more this year than at any other time in recent history. And that shows that people care. I am so grateful to live in a country where people care about their leaders and the ability, and they actually take advantage of the opportunity to choose their leaders and to vote for their laws. Another reason to get excited and to not feel anxious is when we realize that this isn't the closest, craziest election that we've ever had. There have been closer, crazier ones, and we've lived through them. We've seen the transition of power, election in and election out, for 200 and almost 50 years, where power has transitioned from one party to another peacefully, which is an amazing thing to rejoice about and to be excited about, that because of our Constitution, because of the laws of our land, because of the checks and balances between the Supreme Court and the executive branch and the legislative branch, that our system works. And even though there are close elections like this one, it has worked for the last 250 years. And let me talk about the elections that appear to have been closer than this one, so that we can feel comfortable that even if this one is very close, it's still going to work out. I'm speaking of the 1876 election, where Samuel Tilden received more of the popular vote than his opponent, Rutherford Hayes. And I think Samuel Tilden received more of the Electoral College vote. However, he did not receive enough of it to win the presidency outright. And so the House of Representatives had to decide the election as the Constitution dictates. And the House chose not Samuel Tilden, the winner of the popular vote and more Electoral College votes, but they chose Rutherford Hayes, the second place candidate. And of course, that would have sparked an outcry. That was a challenge for our country at that time, but we made it through. And this has happened even prior to that, when our country was still very young, in 1824, when Andrew Jackson ran against John Quincy Adams and a couple other people, who those other people also received Electoral College votes. And Andrew Jackson got 56% of the popular vote, I believe. That's basically a landslide to get that much more than half of the popular vote. But Andrew Jackson did not receive enough of the Electoral College votes to secure the presidency. And so once again, and this was very early in the days of our country, the House of Representatives chose the president. And in this case again, they chose the second place candidate, the one who did not receive the popular vote, and the one who did not receive the Electoral College vote. That was John Quincy Adams. This made Andrew Jackson and his followers very upset. Andrew Jackson quit the Senate, where he'd been serving, and 4 years later he ran against John Quincy Adams, and this time he won. I'm just pointing this out, that there have been more challenging times, and even in my lifetime and in the lifetime of some of you watching this, we've seen close elections, and we've seen where the one who wins the election did not receive the popular vote. That happened for Donald Trump just 4 years ago, and that happened for George W. Bush, when he beat Al Gore with the Electoral College, and when the Supreme Court decided that George W. Bush had won the presidency, but he had not won the popular vote. So this has happened, and we have moved through it. And I'm so grateful and excited to be in this republic where law and order triumphs. I also want to point out that we have a wonderful system where we have ballots that, although they're sometimes hard to understand and sometimes hard to vote clearly, they are better now than they used to be. We've improved. We have a system where every state decides how to choose or how to create their own ballots. And so we have different ballots from state to state. And some people might find that frustrating and annoying and stressful and create anxiety. But 100 years ago, back when Abraham Lincoln, for example, was running for president, the ballots were created by the actual parties. The Republican Party, the Democratic Party, and other parties created their own ballots. And so they printed them on colored paper or with curvy lines or with large fonts and small fonts so you could barely read it. And they did everything they could to trick people so that you really wanted to cast their ballot. And what you would do is you would choose which paper you were going to drop in the ballot box. And so they would pull out the papers, and so you wouldn't mark the paper for the candidate that you wanted. You would put the paper in that was for the candidate you wanted. And that was super confusing back then. We have a better system now. And some might say, well, why don't we just use computers? Why don't we have one computer system throughout the entire country where everybody votes exactly the same way? Why do we have 50 different systems in 50 different states? And why are there some people who vote in person and some people who vote by mail and absentee ballots? And it's just so confusing, and we have to count the ballots in some states after the election, and in other states we can count the ballots before the election. Why is it so confusing and so stressful? Well, again, I'm excited and grateful that we live in this republic where each state and locality decides how they're going to do it. And the reason why that's important is because if we were all under one system, especially a computer system, it would be so much easier for an antagonistic party, for another country, for an enemy country, or for terrorists to target and hack and destroy our elections, because they would only have to hack into the main system, the one that everybody's using, and they could change the election outcome just like that. But in our country, they can't do that. They have to hack into 50 or more different systems. And not only that, but some systems aren't computerized at all, and we're voting on paper still. And that's more secure than these electronic systems where you can be hacked. So I'm grateful that the ballots are the way they are. And I'm excited to see so many people participating. Now, if you're still feeling a little bit anxious or stressed or worried about this election, I'm going to invite you to let it go. Take a deep breath and realize that the worry and anxiety and stress that you're holding within your mind or your heart or your chest or your stomach or wherever that negative emotion resides in you, it doesn't change anything about the election. If there are two people who are trying to get through their day, and one of them is balled up in this tight knot of energy in their throat, or in their headache, or in their heart, or in their stomach, filled with anxiety and stress about the results of the election, and another one has decided to just let it go and go through their day, both of them will go through their day without any effect on the election. The election is going to be decided, and the worry and stress of person A will not change the result at all, but it will affect their day. Person B, who has let it go and who has realized that they have no control over this, will be able to enjoy their day, be able to complete whatever activities they want to complete with peace and in a spirit of love and acceptance for life how it is. So I invite you to take a deep breath and just let it go. Imagine that you're sitting on an airplane and there's a little bit of turbulence, maybe a lot of turbulence, but you realize that worrying and stressing and even grabbing the seat, even crying out, will not change the path of that airplane or how safe it is or how bumpy it is. Nothing you do in that moment can change it. You're not in control. As you ride this turbulent election, which isn't the most turbulent we've ever had, as you feel that anxiety, realize you're not in control. And that's okay, you don't have to be. Can you let it go? Can you release? Can you just say, everything's going to work out. Everything's going to be fine. And it will. And every 4 years, we say this is the most important election of our lives. And every 4 years we say, this is a dumpster fire, this is crazy. And every 4 years we say, we're voting between the lesser of two evils. In fact, they said that back when John Adams and Thomas Jefferson were running for president against each other after George Washington had decided he would not run for a third term. The first election that was ever contested in our country, people said, well, we have to vote for the lesser of two evils. And that has happened ever since. And people have always said, this is the craziest, most turbulent, most important election of our time. And people have always said, well, if that person's elected, then the whole country is going to fall apart. It's always been that way. It's no different now. We are not on the verge of civil war. Yes, we are very passionate about supporting our party and about supporting our candidate, but we're not, I don't believe, ready to slit each other's throats and to attack one another. I hope not. And we don't right now have a vice president like Aaron Burr who's ready to shoot a Treasury Secretary like Alexander Hamilton, which happened early in the days of our country. This is not the craziest time in the history of our country. We have seen crazier days. We do not need to worry or be anxious about this time. We can release it and say, we live in a country of laws. We have a constitution. It has seen us through in the past. We can feel excited and we can realize that life goes on and that everything is going to work out. And we can feel grateful to be a part of this wonderful Democratic and Republican experiment, and to know that there will be a peaceful transfer of power if that's necessary. And finally, I want to point out what happens if the Democrats win the presidency and the Republicans still control the Senate, or the Republicans win the presidency and the Democrats end up controlling the Senate. What happens if we see more gridlock? What happens if we see this where Washington just can't get things done because one party controls the legislature and one party controls the presidency? I'm going to invite you to be excited about that, to release that also, to realize that you're not in control of that and it doesn't matter. It doesn't need to all go your way. Your party doesn't need to control everything. That it's actually wonderful if the parties are controlled by, if the branches of government are controlled by different parties, if there is gridlock. Why? Because that means the system is working exactly the way it was designed to work. Our founding fathers knew that if one person had power, they would become a tyrant. And they designed the system so that one person did not hold all the power. And so we can do no better than to hope that the person who becomes president will not immediately hold all the power and have control and sway over all of the legislature as well as the Supreme Court or whatever. That we can hope that there will be people there to check the power of the presidency. And so it's fantastic when there's gridlock and when things don't get done, because the truth is there is apparently at least half the country who agree with any given issue and another half the country who see it differently. You need to realize, we all need to realize that whatever our view is, there's about half the country that disagrees with us. And we need to listen to them and realize that our way is not right simply because we believe it. And so it's marvelous that we can work together in a spirit of compromise. The country needs to wake up and realize that we compromise. Back in the early days of this country, and if you've seen, again, I've referenced a few times Hamilton, and if you've seen that musical, either on Broadway or on Disney+, you'll remember that in the room where it happened, they had to decide where to put the capital and also had to decide whether or not to form a national treasury. And they compromised. Alexander Hamilton was able to sway those led by Thomas Jefferson so that Jefferson and his followers got Washington, D.C. As their capital on the border of Virginia. And meanwhile, Alexander Hamilton won the national banking system in his favor and set up a treasury system. And they did not agree with each other. That is not, but they were able to compromise. And that is how the government does move forward. And so those of us who are completely angry at our representatives, at the presidency, or at others for compromising their values and giving in to the other side, we need to let that go. Because we cannot get everything our way in order. That's not how a democracy or a republic works. We need to realize that we are in a country that values and needs compromise so that everyone, that doesn't make anyone really happy. Everyone has to sacrifice. Everyone has to give up just a little bit. But I am super excited, again, at this time, to live in this country where we get to decide who our leaders are, where we get to decide our laws, where we get to compromise, where we do not have a tyrant who simply declares victory and claims victory of all the branches of government. And I invite you also to let go of that anxiety and to realize that since I'm not in control, worrying and feeling anxious and feeling stressed won't help anything. What a wonderful time to be alive.